let's have a look at the quick running order before we kick things off. What's on the agenda today? Number one, we're going to be looking at, so what I've done here is I've picked 2 tracks and we're going to mix them, and then we're going to mix them again and mix them again. And I've got examples here of how to layer up your mixing styles. So we're going to start with an easy mix. Hopefully everyone should get the head around it. We're going to just be using EQs. I'm going to show the example, and then I'm going to break down some extra thinking behind it, some extra tips and tricks on the decks. And then I'm going to show another example with the same 2 tracks, how to then do the EQs, but also add effects in there. And then we'll break it down and have a chat about it after and do some extra stuff. Same again. We're going to do everything the same pretty much, but then add hot cues in there. And we're going to layer it up in this way. Number 4, looping. Number 5, I've got some like fader cuts and things that we can do that's quite popular, and combining techniques. And then number 6, Q&A. Feel free to get your questions ready. Don't bother putting the questions in now because I'm just a one-man band right here. I'm going to be operating the cameras and DJing and teaching all at the same time. So wait till the end for the Q&A to start putting your questions in there. I will keep glancing back at the chat when I can. So if you do have specific questions about what's going on, I'll do my best to look out for those questions and answer them how I can. So that's the running order. I have got these examples with house music because I feel like house music, sort of the examples can then be shown quite easily, but you can adapt these to lots of different genres. I have got a few other genres, sort of variations. I've got some techno and I've got some bass house that we can have a play around with as well, and I can do some of these techniques and show you how to set it up with those genres as well. But obviously, when we get to the Q&A, we can open it up to all sorts. So I think we should get stuck in. So this first one is just showing you, I'm going to show you an example now of a basic mix using EQs, and then we're going to break it down after and do some extra stuff. So it's about 2 minutes long, and then you'll see my face again.
Plastic purple.
Big bag and you move it real slow. A slick raincoat and a rich band nose. Snap my right hand just to keep you on the flow. Telling all my money's gonna lie real low. I smell like cream and I look like big chrome. Slick dream cocky when you come into my home. Covered up my sheets with glitter and rhinestones. Add them to my feet if you mix the backbone. Bitch, 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 lips, 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 bitch, 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 lips, 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 bitch, 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 lips, 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 bitch, 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 lips.
Plastic purple.
So there you have a basic example of just some basic EQ mixing. Now, I had to start here because before we get creative, we need to understand this foundation level because everything builds upon that. So I'm going to run through just for 5 minutes some tips around EQing, around what to think about when we're EQing, because everything builds on this. And there's no point doing really crazy creative stuff if we can't get those basics right. So let's get in. Someone wants to record it, that's fine. Vicky McCall, you can record this, go for it. Right, so I'm going to go to the top down and we're going to look at the equipment. First things first, for anyone that is new to even EQ mixing, we've got our 3 EQs here, low, mids and highs. What we want to think about with the EQs is creating a balance between the music, and that's what the EQs are there for, is to make room for sounds by turning them down, or even boost sounds by turning it up. But this 12 o'clock position is the 100% position that we're kind of working towards. So when we're mixing 2 tracks together, most common rule is take the low end out of the track that you'll be blending in, because you don't want the two low ends to clash. If you ever go into a Pirate studio and have the subs blaring away and have both the low ends, it can just muddy the music up and it can like engulf everything in the mix. So that's a common thing. Another thing with this mid is a lot of the body of the music. A lot of vocals will sit in there. A lot of elements of the music will sit in there. So this is quite an important one. A lot of people just slam the low end out, slam it in, swap it over. And, 90% of the time that can work. But don't neglect this mid. By just dropping the mid slightly, it creates room in the mix. And when you swap these over, it just sounds much cleaner and it just creates a much more balanced mix. The highs, it depends what's going on in the music. If it's really tinny and there's lots of like hi-hats in there, then you might want to just drop the highs down slightly. So, lots of people wanting to record now. Right, apply to all future requests. There you go. If you want to record it, you will get sent this, by the way. I'm sending an email out tomorrow with a recording of this, so don't feel like you all need to panic and record it. So then the balance of the EQs. What I'd usually do is take some of this energy away, some of the levels away, but not all of it. We just take some of it away. Then we're blending it in. And then I usually work from the top down. We're thinking about how we can, introduce some of those highs if we've taken some away. Then some of the mids and some of the lows. But it's not a case that you have to do that all the time, but that's quite a nice rule of thumb to stick with. So let's just do an example again with these two tracks. I'll skip towards this last section.
Come on, let me see it for
So we're just getting ready to drop it in. So before we mix it in, I'd take the low end out, bring the mid down slightly, maybe bring some of the high down. And then think about the phrasing. We've got another phrase coming up we can blend in. Working from the top down, we can slowly move the highs over. And then if there's big changes in the music, we can do a quick swap. And then this is where you can, depending on the music you're playing, you could do a straight swap on a phrase change, or you could blend the EQs. And this way you can even get creative just with the EQs. So I could do a gradual blend. And fade it out. And you'll see that this side has kind of mirrored how I started the opposite side. And that's a really good basic way to mix using the EQs. But like I said, we don't have to do all of this slow EQing. So let's mix back the other way, and I'll show you this time doing the EQs much faster. So we'll just skip towards the end. We're waiting for the drop to come up, and then we're going to catch the beat so that it's in phrase. 4, 3, 2, 1, play. Prepare the EQs ready to mix. Four, 3, 2, 1, in. I'm going to blend the other EQs and then just swap the lows nice and sharp with the bass line. And hopefully you heard that created an impact. So just the way we use the EQs changed the way that the mix sounded. 4, 3, 2, and out. So hopefully you've got from that there that you can see that even the way you use EQs can be creative. It doesn't need to be this out of the box, the same robotic movement every single time. Think about what's going on in the music. If you've got a really groovy bass line, do that clean swap and get that groovy bass line in to create that energy impact. Or maybe you've got really extended mix, you're playing some techno and it's really minimal and you don't want to do anything too drastic. So then take your time, use 32 bars of music to gently swap those EQs over. But think about that when it comes to mixing. So anyone, let's see what's going on in the chat. Before we go to the next example, can you change the screen on the CDJs so they show both songs? I'll have a look. I've got it plugged into my laptop, so I'm using it with Recordbox on the laptop, so I don't know if it'll actually bring that waveform down. It's only when using USBs that it'll bring that waveform down. Yeah, shout out to everyone that's locked in. Loving this. Yes. Respect, Olive. Okay, next example. So we've got the EQs. What do we do next? We build upon that. So what I'm going to do now is add in some effects, and I'll show you this example, and then we'll talk through the effects, how to set up the effects channel, and I'll show you some other things. I just used some basic effects in this example, but we can dive a bit deeper, and I'll show you some other effects as well. So let's go.
Come on, let me see it.
Plastic purple.
Big bag and you move it real slow. A slick raincoat and a rich band nose. Snap my right hand to keep you on the flow. Telling all my money's gonna lie real low. I smell like cream and I look like big chrome. Slick green cocky when they come into my home. Covered up my sheets with glitter and rhinestones. Add them to my feet to mix the backbone. Bitch, 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 lips, 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 bitch, 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 lips, 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 bitch, 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 lips, 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 bitch, bitch,
Plastic purple.
So a few of the easiest things you can draw upon as a DJ is using the filter and using the echo. And that's what we used in that example there. So I basically used the filter to help me bring the track in, or you can use the filter to take the track away. It's probably one of the most common techniques, and you've probably seen other DJs do it if you don't do it yourself. And then the echo effect just adds something. So when you take the fader away, it just doesn't cut out really abruptly. It gives that little echo, which is one of the most common effects, again, used by DJs, but it can be used creatively as well. So we can, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through the effects channel, how to set it up so that you know how to set it up. We'll run through a few of the effects and just have a play around with them to give you some ideas before moving on to the next example. Obviously, if you have questions about the effects channel, you can't see it super clearly on the top-down shot just because it's quite a wide angle, but I'll do my best to explain it so that you can then mirror this to a club set out. So first of all, the effects channel's down the right-hand side, and we have this screen, really important. It gives us the information we need. Now, you can see at the moment that there's a lot of stuff flashing. We've got the BPM flashing here. It says auto BPM 113, it's flashing. And then below it, there's a thing called a beat fraction. Let's see if I can just zoom this in, actually. There we go. Let's see if that works. And then this quarter and half are flashing as well. So one of the most common mistakes people do is they don't set up the beat effects channel before they want to use it. And that's where it can start to sound horrible. So I ran through this briefly last week, but we're going to go through it again. So apologies to anyone that was here last week, but it's important. We might as well run through it again. If I've got a track playing, it'll try when I'm on the right channel. If I flick this over to the right channel, it's just out of shot, but I'm just putting it on channel 2. Sorry, channel 3. It's now settled on 130 BPM because it's detected what the BPM is over on this channel. Now, it doesn't always do that very well. Sometimes it might detect it wrong, and if the BPM's wrong, then the effect is going to be applied at the wrong speed. So that's the first thing. Let me zoom back out again. So once we've got the BPM set, if it's not set, you can hold tap and you can use the time here to scroll, and you can manually adjust the BPM. So I can change that to whatever BPM I want, and you can even adjust the decimal place by holding the tap button and the auto and tap button. If you want to get it back out of the tap mode, just press this button here. It goes back to auto mode. which does work most of the time, but if you ever get stuck, use that tap function. Then we want to make sure that the beat fraction is correct. So here we have the beat fraction buttons, and it's flashing in between 2 at the moment. So if I apply this effect, have a listen. This might be something that you've come across. I'll just play it on the track. So it doesn't sound too great. Now listen when I knock the beat fraction to an actual parameter, say a half. It works in time to the music. So make sure your BPM's right. Make sure that the beat fraction is set on a whole setting, such as a half, a quarter, 3/4, one whole beat. If it's between them, like this, you'll see the flashing. That's what we don't want. Then to turn it on, we just use the on and off switch down here, and then we use the level to bring the level of the effect up and down. The echo is great. You can use it on build up. So let's have a listen here. We can combine it with the filter. We can change the beat fraction. If I was using the right filter. So we can use that effect just at any point in the track even. And by combining both the filter and the echo, we can create these little mini fake build-ups just even within the track. So that's something we can do. Next, we could think about reverb, for example. When you've got big breakdowns, they're really good. So if it breaks down. Now, reverb doesn't work on a parameter like a half or a quarter. It's on a percentage. So I've got it on 50% here. You could have it on 25%. Or if you want somewhere in between, you can use the time adjust. And we can put it on something like 40%, 38%. Sounds really nice. And that adds a bit of space to the music, which is great. Another great effect that you can apply is the roll effect. So I've switched it around to roll. It's flashing between the 2 parameters. For the roll, we want to bring it down to a half, a quarter, an eighth. And we can use the roll to create duplication in the beats. So it basically loops in whatever it hears. And for this, I would recommend having it at 12 o'clock for the level and depth. And then we're going to toggle it on and off. By the way, all of these effects and all of these tricks, we go through all of the effects in our intermediate courses for, say, Record Box. So if you've got any Pioneer DJ controller that has access to all these effects, or an all-in-one unit like the XCJ RX3, 2, XZ, we do cover all of this in depth. But the roll effect here, what we can do, if I just go back, it drops in, we're going to have it at 12 o'clock, and we're going to create patterns. And we can use the roll to create patterns with the beats like that. So a few options there for the effects. Let's see if anyone's got any questions just before I move on to the next example. I'm just careful of the time. So yeah, if anyone's got any questions, pop them in the chat. I know someone asked if I can show how to show both waveforms on the CDJs when using USB. I think, let me just double check here. It should just show up automatically if you've got the link cable going from one CDJ to the other and you've got USBs plugged in. It should show up automatically. You can change what shows up here above the waveform, the way it shows up. If you hold down the menu button, you go into the utility, and then on the display, I think it is, or one of these settings, the DJ settings, which I can't get on because I'm not using my USB, I'm using a laptop, you'll be able to change the way it shows up in there. So just have a look around in there if that's what you want to do. Will this work on the DJM 700? All of this will work on the DJM 700 if it has these effects. I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head. Yeah, I think the 700 definitely has a roll, an echo, and a reverb. So yeah, you can go and experiment with those. Any other questions before we move on? I don't know why it says level 1 example here. Right, I'm going to jump in with the next one. When playing on CDJs, do you use quantize enabled? Do you always beat match by ear, or do you rely on optical help using the grid? So when playing on CDJs, I mean, I toggle quantize on and off depending on what I am doing. So quantize is great for looping, and I would definitely have it on for looping. But if I'm using hot cues, which we're going to get onto in this next example, then I might toggle it on and off depending on how I want to apply the hot cues. So that's just something to bear in mind, and I'll show you that when we get onto it. Do you always beat match by ear or rely on the visuals? I beat match by ear, but the visuals are there, so I can use them to my advantage. I've DJed for many years, so I started on turntables, and it's kind of comes naturally to me now. So I would always recommend training your ears and getting used to it with your ears, and getting it right with your ears, because it unlocks a lot more for your brain to do when it comes to creative mixing. If it's constantly thinking about, is this in time, is it not, am I right, I'm not too sure, it looks right but I'm not too sure, then it kind of puts a limitation on how you can grow as a DJ and the skills that you can achieve. So we always recommend in our courses, and we teach learning how to beat match totally by ear by covering all the visuals up and training your ears to know what's right, what's wrong, how to correct it, when to speed it up, when to slow it down, how much to speed it up by, how to get used to the tempo control in your hands. All of that stuff is valuable as a DJ. But no, I don't go in the club and then cover all that up to challenge myself. I'd use it to my advantage in that moment. So thanks for the questions. Great questions. We will have Q&A again at the end as well, and after each section. So next one, level 3, adding hot cues. So we've done effects, we've done EQing. Now we want to think about, can we use the hot cues in any way, and what are they for? So I'll show you the example, and then I'll be back after the example to run through it.
So wicky and titties on perfect face like a kitty, when a bitch worth it. Cinnamon honey with the lips on a verdict. You talk a little bit too much. Birkin swerve that Saturday night with the permit. I got big plans, when a bitch working. When a bitch working.
So there, hopefully you can hear that by using hot cues, we can start to take control of the music and where we want to mix it. So we're not at the mercy of the tracks themselves. We're taking control and saying, at this point, I want to force it to the outro because I've got a vocal coming in. Or at this point, I want to jump straight to the build-up because I want to keep the energy level there. And that's what you want to start thinking about with hot cues, if you're going to use hot cues. When you're setting them, how would you break the track down into pieces? If it was like a Lego display, what are all the pieces that make up that song? And then think about, okay, I want to jump to that piece of music and that piece of music and skip out this section of music. They could be useful hot cues. And when you're setting hot cues, don't feel like you have to use them all the time. It's just sometimes you might call upon some of them for certain mixes. If you find that you're not using the hot cues you've set, you can just delete them. So let's go top down. Let's have a look. Right, hot cues. For anyone that's never used CDJs, the 3000s, the hot cues are along here, just underneath the screen. But if you use any older model of CDJ, potentially in Pirate, they will be here. And there'll be maybe 4 hot cues and then 2 banks, and there's a button underneath to switch from bank A to bank B. So you have 4, and then another layer with 4 as well. And you can prepare all this on the Recordbox software and export it. Those who attended last week will know how to do that. And if not, we've got loads of tutorials online that show you how to properly export using Recordbox. But those hot cues live there. Now, hot cues are basically a point in the track that you press the button, it jumps to that point, and keeps playing. Really useful. Now, you'll see that in the next example that we can add looping, and you can save loops in the hot cues as well, and that's why some of these are lit up orange, but we're just looking at the actual hot cues for now. So when I'm listening to music, I'll think, what is a useful section of music? Maybe I want to, it's a really long intro here, and I want to just get to this second build up. So when I'm mixing this track in, I've got the basic intro, and then when it gets to this section, instead of this first breakdown, I could just force it using the hot cue, and I've just skipped all that section, and I've shortened the track down and made it work for me. Or maybe you want to skip to this breakdown. You've got the options there. Common places to set hot cues usually would be on a breakdown, a build up, potentially a drop, maybe a second breakdown if the second drop's different to the first drop and you want to kind of skip to that point. And they're the structured hot cues, which you can set across most tracks. Maybe there's a little vocal hook or a chorus as well that you want to jump to. That's always useful. A sing-along part, they're the bits you want to call upon. And then it's a case of thinking about, well, what can I do? How can I restructure the music? Before, we were going from the end of this track here, and we'd set this one off and we just mixed it using the intro. But let's do the same thing again. So we set it off, but this time I'm not going to let it play the full intro. I'm going to jump to that A hot cue. And this is where I'd probably recommend putting quantize on, because if you press it slightly wrong, it'll then kick it in at hopefully what is the grid marker at the right beat. 4, 3, 2, 1, A. And I just kill the opposite side and hit A. So now I've skipped to the point that I want. So that's an example. Maybe let's have a listen over here. I've got C hot cue. So that just jumps to like the drums and the vocal. We've got H here. So that's a bit of a build up. So I could do something with that. And this track could drop in. And I could quickly mix it, not have to wait till the end. And I'm going to use this H hot cue to get straight into the mix. So I'm going to set it off in my headphones first, and then let it play through once, and then set it up again. So we're going to put the fader up and jump back to that hot cue and then mix. 4, 3, 2, 1. I gotta stack ass, come on, let me see it working. Look me in the eyes, come on, let me get to working. Working through drugs and I feel like a virgin. Gonna play it all night. So they're straight into the mix. So I've taken control by doing that. What I've done is I've just gone about 8 bars before the track drops in at this section. And I'm just using that hot cue and we're going straight into the mix. But we've got to be confident that beat matching. We've got to be confident with our EQs and where we're swapping them. And that's why we're stepping it up in these levels. You'll notice at the end then, I just applied the filter and the echo like we showed in the last example. So it was somewhere over here. We were mixing and I applied the filter and the echo like this. And then I just did a backspin. And it creates this backspin echo out, which is really cool. And again, another technique that you can add and layer on top of these other techniques. So you can see how this is starting to build up and we're taking control of the music and doing something more with it. So obviously let us know in the comments if you've got any questions. Does anyone know where these sessions are archived? Interested in watching last week's as well? That I missed. Well, a few people have asked that. I will figure out a way to get them to you. I think the email out tomorrow, what I'll do is I'll get people in our team to put last week's link as well. And then those that are coming next week will get all 3. So yeah, make sure you come next week as well. And then you've got access to all 3 and you can watch them back. So yeah, I'll make sure that happens. Track list at the end. Yes. Okay, another good one. I could maybe put the track list again in the email. It makes sense, right? Any questions about hot cues? Let me know in the chat. Like, do you currently use hot cues? Are you scared of hot cues? Have you set loads of hot cues and never touched them? So let us know in the chat. Please could you explain how to use memory cues? Any other ways? I've just lost that. Any other ways to skip through songs on older decks that only have 3 hot cues available, for example? Yeah, great question. Memory cues versus hot cues. Jamie, how can you set active loop on CDJ? Okay, Active loop, you cannot toggle it on and off on CDJs. One of the biggest things that's missing, I feel, on CDJs, you've got to do that on the rekordbox software and predetermine whether you're going to toggle it on and off. Quite frustrating, but that is one of the things. As far as memory cue versus hot cues, great question. I have got a full dedicated video on YouTube if you type memory cue versus hot cue, and we've got an article on our website. But just to break it down, a hot cue, it jumps to that point and it plays. A memory cue is you can set memory cues throughout the whole track, and let's say I just wanted to mix from this position, for example, I'd set a cue point, then I press memory, sorry, I'll put it on the top down. So if I wanted to mix from this position, I'd set a cue point, and then I press the memory button here, and then it adds a little red marker above. Now memory points are static, so if I set more than one, let me just skip through. Let's say I set one here and then I press memory. You'll see two red markers on the waveform, and then I can toggle back and forth using these two buttons to those markers. But I'm working from those points. So if the track's playing, it won't let me jump to those points. It's not like a hot cue. I have to pause the track and then I can toggle through those points and then work from there as a normal cue, to set the track off. A lot of DJs use them as visual markers as well, so you could set memory points on the track to be like, that's my mix in point, that's my mix out point, especially when you're learning. That can help quite a lot. If you want to delete them, toggle to the memory point, hold the delete button there, toggle to the memory point, press the delete button. So they are useful. I know someone just mentioned on old CDJs there might only be 3 hot cues, and you can see there's 8 here, so we have limitations on all the CDJs. If there's only 3 hot cues, set your most important things on A, B, and C in the rekordbox software. If you always want to be able to jump to 3 different sections of the track, set them as your hot cues. Don't waste them on visual markers. Use the memory cues for that. Just use hot cues for things you want to actively jump to and work from. All right, let's just have a quick look in the chat. How are we getting on? I use hot cues. I think the more cues, the better. Is the backspin echo simply the echo effect on the right channel, or is there a separate backspin echo effect? Yep, someone answered. Shout out to Rob for answering that, saying it is just on the effects channel. And loops, that's coming next, don't worry. When you make the cues and hot cues in rekordbox, do they save to the track when you download to CDJs? So when you make hot cues or loops or anything in rekordbox, if you export the music from rekordbox to your USB drive, it will export that data as well, and it exports it in like an XML format, and that's how the CDJs read that information. If you just drag and drop the files from your computer onto the USB drive, it will not move that information across. It has to be done through the rekordbox software. Check out the email that goes out tomorrow, because last week's recording shows you how all of this works and how to do it. Right, how do you set a hot cue? Simply, if you want to set a hot cue, very good question, just press an empty pad and then it's set. Excuse me. Right, I will get to the other questions. I'm just looking at the time. I'm going to get on to level 4, adding loops. So we're stepping it up a bit more. See if you can pick out some of the techniques in this one.
Back with the human. Yeah, we got like so much food. It's fine. It's like
big plans, you know when a bitch working. You know when a bitch working. I got big plans, you know when a bitch working. And I gotta stack down, come on, let me see it working. Look me in the eyes, come on, let me get some working. Work a new drug and I feel like a virgin. Madonna play it all night.
Plastic purpose.
So there you have looping. And in that example, I had a lot of saved loops. I used loops that I'd already pre-planned and saved. Like I mentioned previously, you can set up a loop and then you can save it to any of the empty hot queue spaces and it becomes a hot loop. So if I press this pad now, it jumps there and it activates the loop that I'd pre-made. Now, how do we set loops? How do we save loops? Like, how do we change the loops? What do we do? On CDJs, there's a few different options. I would recommend having quantize on so that the loops lock to the grid of the music. Otherwise, it can be quite tricky. To set a loop, you can do one of many things depending on the CDJ that you have. All CDJs have this in and out orange buttons here, and this is the start and end point that you want to have a loop. Now, if you're using these are manual looping controls, make sure quantize is on 100%. When you use them, you want to count along with the beat, so you'd be counting along 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you'd set it on maybe number 1, and then out on number 4, and then we've got a 4-beat loop. If I were to do it for 8 beats, you get 8 beats loop, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 1. And you'll see I press the out button back on the number 1 because we want the full 8 beats, and then that loop's active. To exit it, it's the next orange button. We tap that, and it undoes the loop and continues playing. We can press the exit at any point. You don't have to wait till the end of the loop and try to time it right. Just press it at any point and it will release that loop. You'll see it goes kind of grey on the waveform. That's one way of doing it. Another way is on the CDJ 3000s here, and some of the older models, they have these automatic 4 and 8 beat loops, so we can press 4. There's a 4-beat loop, or we can do 8. There's an 8-beat loop. These actually half and 2 times the loop length as well. When you go up and down. If you have a loop active, you can use these buttons here. If you don't have this 4 and 8, you can use the memory recall buttons that we just covered to chop it in half and double it. And one last way on the CDJ 3000s is you have this beat loop here on the touch screen, and you can just toggle it on with the touch screen. I'd probably say get used to using these buttons here because they're more tactile, but just make sure that quantize is on. So that's how we set the loops and undo the loops. Where do we set loops then? Well, it's just like the hot cues. Think about what do you need to do with the music? How do you take control of the music? And just like we broke the track down into pieces with the hot cues, maybe you want one of those pieces of the track to stay like that for a longer period of time. And that's where a loop comes in. So useful things. Instrumental sections. I saw someone just commented saying, how do you play a 5-hour set if you haven't prepared your hot cues and things? Because maybe you just can't for 5 hours. Fair enough. And he said about how to avoid vocals from clashing. Now that comes in where if you hear a bit of instrumental and you're mixing another vocal track in, set that loop, hold that track where it is in instrumental, and then mix the next track in, and you don't have to worry about a vocal coming in because you've held it on a piece of instrumental. So looping is useful in that way. We could loop vocals to sample them into the mix. We could loop instrumental sections. We could loop, parts to make them much longer. If the intro is really short, we can make the intro as long as we need it to be by looping it. Still think about the phrasing of the music. Think about, the structure of that loop and try and have it at the start and the end of a phrase. If it's, say, 8 bars, 16 bars, even 32 bars, you want it to kind of have a beginning and an end, so it doesn't sound weird when it goes back to the start again. So always listen to your loops in that sense. I think I'm just looking at the time. I'm going to move on to the next example because I want to get to the Q&A because I see that you're all pumped up in the chat as well, and I don't want to run out of time. So let's do the last example, and then we'll do some Q&A. And I'll go through more stuff on the decks. Last example here. This is where we're starting to combine things together. There's one more technique, which is fader cuts. If you've watched James Hype, you'll have heard this before. But you can do this with many genres as well. It's a really cool technique, and it just takes looping to the next level, and it starts building up some, patterns and rhythm within yourself, and you can get really creative with it. So let me show you this. We'll talk about it, and then we'll do some Q&A.
Gonna play it all night.
Plastic Purpose.
When I'm working. Lips.
Right. Respect to everyone in the chat. Yeah, I see it. I appreciate it. Thank you. But what I want you to get from that is that there's a lot of different ways to mix the same two tracks together. None is necessarily the best. It depends on the situation you're in. It depends on what you're trying to achieve as a DJ. And, you know, if you're playing to different crowds, if you're doing it, recording it for a mix, all these different situations call for different techniques. But it just shows that you can get super creative with the same two tracks. Don't feel like you always have to keep finding new music to play. Keep finding new music to play to try and unlock some kind of creativity. A lot of it is done on the decks, and it can be rinsed and repeated once you've learnt the techniques. Something we focus on heavily in our courses is creative mixing, and just like this, because it's something that I love doing. So just get that in your head. Just think, okay, I've got two tracks here. I mix them the same way every time. Can I do something different this time? Let me just try and set some hot cues and mix the track in a different order. And then you just reload them again and go, okay, I'm not going to touch the hot cues this time, but I'm going to just pull that random effect that I never really touched before. And I'm just going to have a listen and a play around with it and see if I can just use that effect in the same transition again. And then it starts building up from there and the creativity opens up. Just to run through, so we've got about 10 minutes, just over 10 minutes left. I'll go 15 minutes. I'll go a bit later. But just to quickly run through, what happened there is you can set loops on the CDJs. I'll do it on this side just because it's closer to me. And I can set a loop, like a 1 beat loop. Now, if I press any of these two orange buttons again, I can change the point of that loop. So I chopped it down to a half. If you press the out button, it just flashes, and I can use the jog wheel to create that. If I press the in button, I can chop it from the start. And you can change that loop length. Now, you've got to do that from a tight loop already, because if it's too long, it'll just start to sound offbeat. And once you've got this tight loop, you can then create cuts with it, whether it's the up fader, or whether it's a crossfader. You can create these cuts with it. Now you can clean it up. You know, I had a reverb on at that point, so that, and on Crossfader B, so that it just kind of fills the gaps. You hear that reverb. And all of that together can, unlock a lot of creativity. And then it was a case of just figuring out, whilst we're doing that, we've got to be mixing the other track in, and we're doing a lot with our hands, and I've used the hot cue to jump straight to the build-up, so I wasn't waiting for the whole track to play. And there was a lot more preparation going into that than just, I've just loaded that song and we just do it on the fly. You can do it on the fly. It'll take a bit of practice to build up that muscle memory. But I just wanted you to really see the possibilities there and the scope of all we've really used are effects, hot cues, and looping, and then being clever about what's going on in the music, our EQs, the foundations, making sure it sounds clean all the time. And then that's it, ultimately, is trying to just bring all that together in different ways. And just with the same two tracks, we had 5 different examples there. All sounded great. Not necessarily one was better than the other, but they would work in different circumstances and provide different experiences for the listener. So, yeah, I want to open it up to you now. Q&A. Write your questions in the chat. We've got about 10 minutes left. Just while you're writing the questions in the chat, just to let you know, we've got discounts for everyone, 35% off all of our DJ courses. If you're thinking about learning, with Crossfader, you can use PIRATE.COM. This will all be in the email tomorrow as well. And you can check out our courses. We've got everything from beginner to intermediate courses specifically for like the Flex 4, for example, or the DJ 200, DDJ 400. We've got Record Box, beginner, intermediate, Serato, beginner, intermediate, Tractor, Denon. And then we've got genre specific, so like house mixing techniques, techno mixing techniques, hip hop mixing techniques, as well as creative stuff like scratching, tone play, and transition. So there's so much to choose from in there. Or you can just look at the whole complete package. We sell everything for basically like 95% off the retail price. And you actually get access to all future courses as well. So bit of a sales pitch there. Had to be done. It'll all be in the email tomorrow. Go check it out. If you haven't been on our website before, there's loads of free content on there as well. We are crossfader.co.uk. And we're always on the other end of an email if you've got questions. Right, so just quickly back to this Q&A. Let me see what's going on. Right, how hard is muscle memory to move between CDJ 3000 and 2000? You'd be pretty sound. I think it's, unless you're doing loads of crazy stuff on the hot cues, so you're like doing loads of like finger drumming, like the muscle memory is fine. It's just that hot cueing, if you're doing crazy stuff, does move to like over here, and it's a bit different. So other than that, though, I think you'll be all right. Spiral effect, what do you do with it? I'll show you that in a second. How hard? Right, I've got that one. What are your thoughts on sub-based online radio stations versus just posting mixes on SoundCloud and Instagram? Excuse me. For a DJ trying to get the shiz out there. Why not do both? Do as much as you can. To get yourself out there, don't limit yourself. Do as much as you can. Right, spiral effect. I need a drink of water as well. Right, so let me just get rid of the pop-up there. Spiral effect. Let's jump onto the spiral. Now, I'd recommend using the spiral effect maybe on build-ups. Across an extended period of time, so we're going to do it here. I've started on one beat, and then the spiral works nice if you then toggle it down quite fast, maybe down to a 16th of a beat, and then back up again to a whole beat, and you'll hear how that sounds. I'm going to apply a bit of filter at the same time. Let's turn it on. And it basically creates this, it's like an echo, but it fills all the gaps between the echoes. So rather than just jumping between parameters, it kind of has this sound going on. You could do it just in the track itself. We could use the X pad here. I didn't cover this, but just watch along. So yeah, that's one way of using it, and there are other ways of using it, but that is definitely one of the main ones. Let's see what else. Any advice on copyright for doing mixes on YouTube and Twitch? The copyright thing for YouTube, they just take a cut. I think you need 1,000 subscribers, so it's building up those initial subscribers, and then after that, you can pretty much upload anything. It just means you won't earn ad revenue on it. The labels earn the ad revenue on it. We upload loads of mixes to our YouTube, and you'll see underneath it clocks all the tracks, but it doesn't take the mix down. It just, the adverts that run on it, we don't get any money from that. It just goes straight to the labels, which is fair enough. But I think you need 1,000 subscribers before you can do that. Okay, we've got 5 minutes left. How would you mix a melodic track which has 32 bars chorus? We've got which effects are usually on most/all setups. I've had people tell me not to use them much since not all equipment has them, so don't rely on them. Yeah, so that's a great one. Is there aren't effects on, there's Depends on the mixer. If you've got a Pioneer DJ mixer in front of you, there will be some kind of effects channel usually, and most will have an echo, a reverb, a delay. What else? Filter, flanger, phaser are probably the most common ones. And then there's extra ones that, depending on the model, they kind of added some, took some away. Don't rely on them. You know, all of the stuff in this whole workshop, rely on level 1. Rely on the structure of your set and mixing, using phrasing and using EQs. Rely on that. Everything else is a bonus. If you can do a good set without anything else and just EQing, then you're winning. Everything else adding on top just helps you level up your sets. But yeah, don't rely on it. Just like we spoke about the sync and, you know, about BPM and the visuals, like, don't rely on it. It's there to take advantage of, but as soon as we rely on it, then in instances where maybe there isn't that effect there or there isn't that feature there, you're stuck. So yeah, it just goes for pretty much everything with DJing. Go right to the basics. Can you mix 2 tunes together and make them sound clean using the EQs? Then you're good. Build everything on top of that. Best USB drives that can take a bullet on the road. I mean, I don't know what gigs you're going to, but I've got SanDisk Extreme ones, and I've got these little SanDisk ones as well. I don't know if you can see them. But to be honest, I don't have like a one-hit wonder recommendation. SanDisk are a good memory brand, and I've always used them, and they've treated me well. So I'd go with SanDisk. Why would you use Beat Jump over hot cues? I have it on my DDJ. Why would I use it? Beat Jump's good if you haven't set up hot cues. You can skip like through the track in phrase while you're mixing quickly. So maybe you're mixing an intro in, then you've just seen, there's like a minute and a half worth of this intro. I need to get into the mix a bit quicker. You could just beat jump forwards and it will stay in phrase if you've beat jump like 16 beats at a time, for example. That's if you haven't set up hot cues. You could also hold something in place and go, I've let that, go on too long, and need to just bring it back, and you could kind of just be clever about it and bring it back. But it's also useful for setting up hot cues. You can, when the track's paused, beat jump through it and then go, okay, I've gone 32 bars, hot cue, beat jump, 32 bars, hot cue. It doesn't always work exactly like that, but it can help through that. Okay, we've got 2 minutes left. Someone said, actually, do you like using Allen and Heath Zone 96 or any of the Allen and Heath mixers for that? I do like using them because it brings it back to those basics of EQing well and making things sound clean. They basically they don't have a full fancy effects channel, but they do have, a lot of them, a 4-band EQ, so it splits the mid into 2. You've got a low mid and a high mid, which gives you more control over the EQing. They have filters on them as well. But other than that, you're just down to basic mixing. So that just goes back to what I said before of being confident in that basic mixing and clean mixing, and then add things on top if you have them there. But I love the sound quality is great on Allen and Heath. They're great mixers. They're really nice to play with, especially if you're doing long blends, a lot of techno mixing. You'll see a lot of techno DJs using them. So it's great for that. We are just about to run out of time, but don't worry. You'll get an email tomorrow. You'll be able to watch this back in all its glory. And next week, we've got Workshop 3, the final one. I'm going to be going through this kind of similar thing, but we're looking at mixing between genres, how to get from house to hip-hop, or how to move from hip-hop to drum and bass, or drum and bass to house, or if you're doing a lot of open format mixing, or even taking a lot of requests at the gigs that you play at, or if you play at weddings or parties, then I really want to kind of like open up this box for you of tools to go, okay, I can do this with confidence now, and maybe even with some creativity, and help me stand out as a DJ. Even if you're not planning on playing, 10 different genres every night, there's still times if you're just a straight up house DJ, for example, you could throw a wild card in there, and you could transition to like an original sample of a hip hop track and then back up to, the sampled house version. And that's cool in itself. Excuse me. And on that note, thank you so much. Yeah. Respect. I'll see you next week.